All right, so let's now go over maybe, I'll try to go over maybe from scratch, how you can develop from scratch the solution for practice test number 2 for your programming test 2 this Friday. There might be certain parts I will type maybe without too much explanation, but you can stop me if there's anything that might be, you might need a little bit more attention. I also got my iPad ready. If you need some visualization where I cannot, which I choose not to do, you can just tell me. I can also do it as well. All right. So what I assume is you already import the practice test 2 starter into your Eclipse. Okay, so of course we got lots of compilation error. Just before that, I would say run the test cases to see how many you're supposed to complete by the end of this test. Okay, right click and then run this JUnit test over here. And of course we got compilation error. Just proceed just for now. And you will see that just takes a little bit of time. Okay, we got 16 test cases in total. So let's try to do maybe about half or maybe 10, and then we can take a short break and we'll take attendance just to give you guys credits, and then we'll continue. Okay, like before. Okay. So also the test cases here, the name, its name themselves also suggests about which class it is about. We are gonna do first about the test cases. That's to do with customer profiles. It's about 7 or 8 of them. Let's finish them first, and then we'll move on to the retail store and also store manager. So these are the little bit trickier classes that we have to get right. Okay, let's go one by one. And of course, there are 2 possible ways you can go further, right? In the real test, you can, the way I'm gonna do it is I'm gonna comment out everything first, and then uncomment test by test, just a little bit easier for us to see for the review session. But during the actual test, you can do it the same way, but you just gotta make sure maybe in the last maybe 10 to 15 minutes before the actual test ends, if you still cannot really get to the end, I would suggest uncomment all the remaining test cases and then try to declare any missing classes and methods, at least get rid of the compilation error so you don't really receive any penalty, right? And of course, if you really want to say, I want to uncomment everything, I just want to spend the very first 10 to 15 minutes just to declare all the required classes and methods, like how I did it, maybe in the lab solution walkthrough, you can also do it that way. It's completely up to you, okay? You can choose different way as you like. So what I would do is I'm gonna comment out everything except the very first test, okay? So I'm gonna start from here and then scroll all the way down here, and then I'm gonna say command or control / all right. So now everything is commented out except for the very first test. Okay, let's now work on test by test. Okay, the first test here should be kind of straightforward. You can see obj is declared of this type, so we should really create this particular class. So as Judy illustrated before, you can either use the autogen function in Eclipse, that's okay. We can just declare the class manually. That's what I personally like. Okay, so I'll just copy the name of the class over here and make sure everything you actually create is gonna go under the model package, right? Right click on the model package, I would say new and then class, okay? Call that, okay, just copy and paste, right? So I don't risk spelling anything wrong. So customer profile and then finish. All right, so it's here, and then you can see here I got this compilation error resolved, and then I need to fix the next one. It's right beside the new keywords. So I'm going to have this constructor here. What I normally like to do is I'll just copy this particular instance of calling the constructor, and then I can work out exactly what to do accordingly. But you can also look at the comments over here, right? So you can see a profile is going to pass the name and also a limit on the number of orders they are allowed to place. So this one kind of suggests to you, internal behind the scene, there's going to be an array that's actually stored in the customer profile class. And this time we don't really have like a magic number to say what the maximum size of the array should be. So it should be somehow determined by whatever argument is actually passed over here, right? Just remember. So there's another flavor you might have to implement during the test, right? So let's now go to the customer profile over here, okay? So this is just one example, right? So I'm gonna declare constructor, which will be public, all right? And then the first one here should be the name. So I can say string, the name, And this will be the maximum limits of the number of orders, right? So let me call that, let's say, maximum number of orders. Okay, so here I'm just going to say integer. So that'll be maximum number of orders, whatever name you like, right? Just like that. And then we know that this here is going to determine what's the actual maximum size of the array that we can declare later. But for now, let's not worry. I would say go with whatever that's really needed for the current test. Okay, if I go back here. Okay, so the first method we're going to implement will be get profile report. Apparently, you can see the whole method call is used as a right-hand side for the variable assignments. And that the method call should really return a single string, right? Feel free to copy, again, the whole thing over here. And then where should that method belong to? You got to look at the context objects, right? A little bit connection to what we said in the lecture. The static type should determine the range of method that should be callable on the context objects, right? So here you can see the method we are trying to call here is called getProfileReport. In order to make that compilable, you have to make sure it's declared in the static type of OBJ. OBJ was declared as customer profile, so that's a static type. So we should really go to the customer profile and then put that method. Okay, so what I can say is string here is just a return type. So string and then getProfileReport. Okay, by default I can say return. I can say public. Return null. Just for now. Anything we need to fix, we'll fix it. Just make compilation work. And then also we got get status of last order over here. That's also another string accessor, right? The same class. Let's put it down for you. So public string and guess the status of last order, and also return null. Right? At least we got rid of all the compilation error, right? And of course, if you rerun the test cases, you're gonna see that single test is gonna fail, right? And of course, you can check it. It's really about the string not being satisfied, right? You can double click on here, and then you will be able to see. Okay. So okay. Anyway, you can do that on your computer. So what I would do is I'm going to focus on this one here, right? Let's talk about the first one. S1 is actually returned from the get profile report. So that means the profile report somehow has to print out something. Has not yet placed any orders. So that means in the very beginning when you first create the objects, maybe when the array is actually, when the array has not stored anything, that's really what you should put, right? So let me do something here, okay? You can see Alan here really correspond to the Alan, the name we are setting. So one thing you guys really want to avoid doing is hard coding anything in your actual implementation. You want to make it as general as possible. All right. So what I will do is, let me now go back to custom profile. Let's handle the name first. So I can declare a private attribute here. So let's say private string and also name. And then in the constructor, I can say this dot name will be name. All right, just set a name. And also, there's another thing I can do. Let's do this a little bit later because this one has to do with the size of the array. We don't really have to create the array just yet. Only need to do that when we need to add the order into the customer profile. That'll be for the next test. So another thing we can do is about the status, which is to do with this one here, right? Get status of last order. So the method name itself gives you a hint. There should be some attribute there that's going to be updated every time you do some changes to the customer profile. So in this way, we can just call that maybe status, or you want to call it status of order, right? It's completely up to you. But I'll just call it exactly like that, okay? So I'm going to put the attribute over here. Also string. So that will be called the status of last order. All right. And then let's now take a look at the two strings we should satisfy. To begin with, you can see here the get profile report has not yet placed any order. Okay. So let's now just make it pass. So what we can do is, so let's say we got some string s, okay, empty string. And then how do we do that, right? So this is somehow the string we want to eventually return, something like that. However, this Allen here is not always Allen. It depends on what the name is. So we can use a string dot format that you guys actually did it earlier. So we can say string dot format. Let me just make sure I got it right. So there we go. Okay. So what we can say is format over here. And over here, we're going to say $S. So this one here is going to be replaced by the name of the customer. And then we can say has not yet placed any orders, right? You can see I'm just trying to be consistent here. The only thing is the Allen here is replaced by $S. And what should that be? It should be this .name, right? All right. Okay, that's just for now. That's the default. Of course, it's going to be expanded later, right? Because we might have as many orders as possible. Okay, return S, right? And what about get a status for the last order? If you go back here, you will see that in the beginning, since no order has been placed so far, so this is something I can also do. So for this particular attribute here, so this is our attribute. So when we first create the objects, that's the time where you have no order that's being added, right? So that's why you can put initialization here, this dot status of last order, something like this. However, we can do something using string format. Oh, before I do that, I gotta say S assigned to, right? Otherwise, if you only do this line here, it's only gonna return a string. But you gotta make sure the return string is stored into S right here. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna say over here, string dot format. Okay, and then, so here, Allen has to be replaced by $S, which will be this dot name, right? They are very similar. So now the difference is this status of last order is actually an attributes. And this one here is more like a return value from the accessor. But they're both like a string, right? So you got to set it up appropriately. Okay. And if you like, you can also define some method here just in case it might be useful. You can say string, let's say get. Oh, actually, sorry, it's already there. Beg your pardon. Yeah, so now we can make this one more appropriate. Rather than returning null, we can just return the current value for the attributes right here. Right? So whenever we update the value for this status of last order later, so if you call this again, it's going to return the updated value. Right? And run the test. All right, test one passed. Any questions so far? All right, still pretty basic. All right. All right, let's now go on to test number 2. And this one here seems to be more about adding the order, right? So that means we may have to start worrying about the array. And also you can see we got some try and catch block, which tells you that you may have to worry about exception as well, right? So definitely more challenging, the second test. And also there's some description here about what's the valid kind of the products, similar to your lab number 2. What's the valid kind for the vaccine manufacturer, right? Similar idea. So if you've already done your lab number 2 and went over the solution, so this one should not be strange to you, okay? All right, you guys can also go over this. So every time you want to add an order, notice that here, for this practice test, we don't really have a class called order. So these attributes like a name of the product, quantity, and also the retail store, and also the dates. So these are not the attributes of another class called order. So what we'll show to you is it is possible to store these directly inside different arrays in this class. So that's something you can also, if you want to, just for practice, you can feel free to create another class called order, which you can try. But in the actual test, don't create any class that's not required, right? I'm just showing to you. There might be 2 possible ways to implement things. Yes?
We did create a new class, but if we create a new class in the test, will be...
You will not be graded. So you want to make sure you only create the classes that you're required to implement. But I'm just saying, as an extra practice, beyond this practice test, you can feel free to create an extra class called order. But I would say, in case this is what you're given in the actual test, you may want to practice about implementing multiple arrays, okay, which I'm going to do. Okay, good. All right, let's now take a look quickly about here. So basically, we're adding an order right here. So I think for this add order method, I'm going to do multiple things, which are going to help us for multiple tests. iPad mini, as you can see, that one is a valid one. Okay, one of the valid ones. So we don't really expect any exception, right? Well, if you recall the JUnit lecture, if you put a fail assertion right here in the catch block, that means if you got the exception called, that should be failure. It's not expected, right? That's something we should do as well. And then later on, we are going to call the get profile report again, and that one there should be updated. So that means what we used to do over here about get profile report, this part here should be expanded as well. Specifically, we should really go over the array of orders and then try to print them out into a string. Okay, that's what we'll do. All right, so let's now try to do the add order from scratch. Okay, let me just go to the, again, customer profile. Because you can see that the add order over here comes from the OBJ, whose static type is customer profile. So what I would do is I'm going to just copy this line here, so I will get myself reminded about what's going to be there. All right. So what I would do is I'm going to say over here, public, and add order is not supposed to return anything, so I'll just say void. All right. And then, so this will be the products, this will be the quantity, and this will be the store, and this will be the date of the order. So we got various information for a single order, right? Let's now declare parameter, and then we'll declare attributes very soon. Okay, so here we got, for example, string product, and also integer quantity, and also string the store, and also the string the dates. Right, so I think just feel free to copy and paste between the starter test and also the actual classes. So you can always get yourself reminded about how many parameters you're supposed to declare. All right, and then the idea would be we want to make sure the product over here is really one of the 6, right? If it is not one of the 6, we should throw some exception. Let's handle that part there. So the exception we are really expecting to see would be invalid product kind exception. If the product over here that's being passed is none of the 6 that's listed over here, we should throw that exception. Otherwise, we should be able to go ahead and add the order accordingly, right? So let's do all these together. Okay, so let's now outline the structure over here. Okay, so we can say, okay, let me just move it to the center over here. So there will be something here. So the product here, later on, when you see the actual description, you will see that these 3 will belong to the manufacturer Apple. And these 3 over here will belong to Microsoft, right? That's also manufacturers, also one of the things you have to worry about. Because you can see that as the, if you look at the assert equals, you can see that we say it's an Apple product. So Apple here is the manufacturer, or it can be Microsoft. So that's also some of the things we have to worry about, okay? So let's go to customer profile. So we have to do like this. If the products dot equals, right, the string equals, I'll just write it out. You can see back in the comments, right? iPad mini. And because we're going to say that if it's either of these, it can be this. How about this? Let me just see one might be the best way. Oh, okay. This might be the best way to align. Okay, like that. Okay. Or it could be that the product equals over here, the iPad Pro 12.9, or product equals, you can also double check on the comments there, Apple Magic Keyboard, right? If this is the case, we're going to set a manufacturer accordingly. Okay, I'll leave that empty just for now. Okay, else if, and for that part here, I can just copy this, right? I can reuse it. Okay, else if So now I got another 3. So we got Surface Pro, 9. And also we got Surface Laptop, 5. Surface Pro, keyboard with Slim Pen 2. All right, over here. And then if that's the case, we're going to set the manufacturer accordingly. So this part here, manufacturer should be Apple. And this one here should be Microsoft. Otherwise, this is the part where exception should be thrown because none of the 6 that we assume. Right? So this is the part where we're going to say throw new. Okay, so let's see the exception name. Let's just copy and paste so we don't make any spelling mistake. Invalid product kind exception. Throw new like that, right? And then, of course, you can feel free to put some message over here. Just leave it empty. It's completely up to you. It's not going to be tested. Okay. Right. So this one here, I can simply move my cursor over, and then you want to create this class. Usually, the very first hit in Eclipse should be able to help you create an exception class. I click on that, and you got to make sure it will be created under the model package. And then also make sure the superclass should be exception. So every exception class you're creating should extend the exception, right? And then I'm just going to say finish. All right, and one thing you should really remember, because usually, always when you create an exception, you should really call the constructor with the string parameter. So you're going to say public, and then exception name, and over here, string S. Super S. Right, exactly what we said in the class. Okay, this exception class is done. I think we got maybe another 2 more exception classes created, which will be created the same way. Okay, so now we're good. So here, throw new. So now it is complaining that it's now not handled. Right? So now we need to apply our knowledge from the exception lecture. This is where the exceptions originated. And now this method is already subject to catch with specify requirements. Should we catch with specify in the origin of the exception? Specify, right? Okay. I'm just trying to remind you about what we learned. Give me one moment. Okay. So we should really specify. So I can say throws that exception. All right. Everything compiles. Okay. Question. I think it really depends on which constructor version you're calling. So I would say maybe just go with what we said in the lecture. You may want to call the version with the string parameter, like what we said in the class, right? So in this case, you just say super S, in the constructor. Yeah. As long as it passes test cases, you might be just fine. Okay. Yeah. All right. So as far as the exception throwing is concerned, that's good. And then we're gonna do the rest. You can think about so far we only kind of give the skeleton about under what circumstances should we signal some error about the product input over here. But for the rest, if there's no error for the input, we should really add the order into the customer profile. So now we're gonna create arrays. And as I said earlier, in this practice test, you are not required to define or declare the order class. That means you should not declare that yourself. What you should do is encode all the necessary information about all the orders for the customer profile into separate arrays. I'll put it here. Okay. First of all, a customer profile stores an array of orders. Each order contains different parts of information. For example, it would be it would be the products, quantity, etc. etc. Okay, let's now declare them separately. Okay. Okay, let me just say one more thing. Rather than declaring just an array of order, because you're not allowed to create any class. That's not required. Declare separate arrays for storing the different parts. Okay, let's now declare them. So I got private string over here. That would be for the products. Right? You can see basically every part that we talk about the products, the quantity, the store, and dates. We're gonna store different array for each one of them. Okay, and basically each one of them is going to be also with a counter that tells us how many have been stored so far. Right, number of products, number of dates, etc. So here I'm gonna say private int number of products, right? Number of products, okay? And we do something similar for all the rest. So private and also string and manufacturers. Okay, so private integer number of manufacturers, right? And also we got private string. Another thing you can see here, so the manufacturer is derivable from the products. Depending on, for example, iPad mini should be Apple and Surface Pro should be Microsoft. Okay, so string here, we got quantities. And then private int, number of quantities. And then we also got dates and stores. Let's just define all of them. Okay, also private string. We got the dates for the order. So private int number of dates. And we also got private stores. And private integer number of stores. Okay. Of course, it should be string array. Each one of them. So one quick visualization for you. So what we got is, for example, you can think about at a runtime, you have some customer profile objects over here. Okay, so let's now go back to the Eclipse and the next the next test. If you look at that. So we don't need to worry about customer profile, at least for now, and also the exception class we did. So now let's now go to the next test. Now it's going to be about retail store, right? So there are 3 classes in total, the retail store and also the manager as well. And we'll get there, okay? So let's now uncomment the very first test. That has to do with retail store. And somehow in the practice test for here, we just give you some name over here that kind of suggests about the class is testing. But in the actual test, it could be just T1, T2, T3, right? So, but you can always judge by the actual contents. All right, so let me start from here and then go all the way until the end over here. All right. All right, so that's the first one. All right. So let's sort out. So apparently we need a new class, retail store. Okay, I'll copy the name. And again, if you want to use the E-class to generate the class for you, no problem. I just personally like to create myself. Okay, new and then class. Retail store, just copy and paste. All right, it's there. And then the constructor would be the retail store, right? You can see the retail store with its name. Apparently, Best Buy, Richmond Hill should be the name of the store, right? Seems to be very straightforward. So if you like, we can create an attribute for the name of the store right away. Okay. All right, so public, that's the name of the constructor. And this will be just the string, the name of the store. Right, I can do right away, I can say private, pretty much like a customer profile. I can say string, the name of the store, and I can say this, the name will be the name. All right, right here. All right, that's good. And then let's now move on. So this line is good, and we need to worry about this one here, get available stock, right? So this one here is really going to return some integer. How do I know? You can see this method here, obj static type is retail store. So that means this get available stock should really go to retail store. And then that method there should return something that can be compared against 0. And remember, if you want to compare against a double value, like with a fractional part, you have to give some tolerance, like epsilon, which is not the case over here. So that means this method here should return an integer rather than double, right? This kind of subtle design decision you have to make. All right, so let's now copy this method here. And then we're just going to public int right here, get available stock. iPad mini just looks like a product, right? Right here. And for now, I can just say return 0. Just make a compile. We definitely got to fix the logic pretty soon. All right. Get available stock. Let me just double check. Yep. Okay. And then after this, let's see anything else. Yeah, it will pass the test cases right away because it's just returning 0. And then this will be S stock. Basically, this one here, in some ways, quite pretty explicit hints because you're adding a stock into the retail store. It's like an array, right? The stock itself. Okay. So what we should do is you can see iPad Pro, the products, has the corresponding stock 200, right? It looks like we need 2 arrays, right? Similar idea. So one array is going to store the products. The other array is going to store integer quantities, or like a stock, right? Why don't we do it right away? Okay, let's go back to retail store. Very similar to the customer profile. So I think somehow this practice test really shows to you how you can manage multiple arrays. I think Tommy, you kind of asked me before the break. So in this case, can you just use a single counter for the 2 array? Yes, you may do that, but I'll just do the more general way. I'll just get multiple counters. Okay. Okay, I would say private string products. Private integer number of products. Okay, and private integer. So here you can say quantities. I'll just say stock, right? I'm not even sure that's grammatically correct, but that's okay. right? You see what I'm writing here, right? Just multiple, plural. Private integer number of stock. All right. So these four attributes will give me the programming pattern I need to manage both the product and stock, right? And then here we got S stock. So that means I need this mutator method, right? Doesn't return anything. So what I'll do is I'm gonna, let's put it right here. Maybe after constructed, doesn't matter. Public void S stock. Apparently you will need the products and also the stock. String the products and also integer the stock. Okay. And then if you look at the test description here, okay, so here for simplicity, so we assume that the maximum size of the array is actually 6. You can read the description more carefully, right? So there might be some extra assumption in the test just to make things a bit easier for you. Just always pay attention to. So I'll let you read it, okay? And also here, product name is always valid. That means we don't really need to program the exception like what we did for add products, right? Like an add order in the customer profile, okay? Anyway, all right, so this one here will be very straightforward. So let's do it properly. Every time you're doing this programming pattern here, of course, you got to declare attributes, number one. Number two, you got to make sure they are properly initialized in the constructor. Number three, you will actually update them properly in the mutator. Let's do all of them. So over here, we're going to say this dot products will be new string. Over here, what should be the size? And again, you can check that the assumption is length 6. All right. Just make it easier. All right, so I can put 6 right here. Okay. And then this dot stock will be new integer array, also of length 6 here as well. Okay, that's good. Yeah, good. Maybe I just, make a typo. There we go. That would be the correct spelling. There we go, stocks. Okay, and then we go to the S stock, and we just update the 2 array and also 2 counters, right? So this dot products, this dot number of products will be products, and also this dot NOP plus plus this dot stocks, this dot number of stock will be the stock. This dot number of stock plus plus. Right? Pretty straightforward, right? Over here, just that we don't have to worry about any exception. All right, this is good. And then get available stock. Of course, if you just run the test cases, this is not going to pass because the get available stock always returns 0. So now you got to figure out exactly what the stock is. It's very similar. You can think about, it's going to be, okay, let me just write very quickly here, just for you. So we are talking about retail store, okay? So maybe RS1, All right, so one more thing I would like to cover very quickly, but I'm going to release the whole solution to you anyway. So I want to talk about another class called Store Manager, especially the very first test case over here. Okay. Okay, right here. Okay, if you look at this method here, first of all, we got to create a class called Store Manager. All right, let's create that quickly. So we're going to say right-click on Model, New, Class, Store Manager, and finish. All right, it's there. And then you can see that there is one method here. But notice that this method is kind of special, called getInstance. But this method here, you can see that what's the context objects? There's no context objects, just a class name. What does that mean? Static method. All right, so that's something I want to mention to you. Okay, first of all, this should be a static method. Of course, we got other get name, set name, etc. Okay, but we'll get there. Okay, so the store manager should really have a name. Okay, I just want to talk about this test case specifically, right? For other parts, you can definitely, we don't have that many left. You guys can look at the solution and work it out. Okay, so I can go to store manager over here. So first of all, I should really create that. Oh, sorry, let me just copy that again and then show to you. Okay, so you can see the way we call that method is right here, store manager. All right, right here. So that should be a static method, getInstance. So I will simply say right here, public static, right, getInstance. And what should that return? Basically, if you look at that over here, what should be return type? That should be store manager, right? The class itself, which is okay. So that should be the store manager over here, right? Going to return something. I'll just return null, just for now. All right, that's how we can at least define the method, okay? And then I'll get there in a moment. Also, we got name here for the manager, right? Why don't we do that as well? Okay, private string the name over here, and set a name, get a name should be very standard. Public void set the name, string the name, this the name, name. Public, and then also the string get the name, return this the name over here. All right. So everything, oh, not yet. Okay, let's see what else. Okay, let me save it, of course. Now everything compiles. Does it? Oh, I'm so sorry. This one here. Okay, save it. Everything compile. However, it's going to fail the assertion. Let's see exactly what failed. Okay, I don't need a retail store. I don't need a customer profile. Just a store manager, right? And then I'm just going to rerun the test case right here. Well, it fell, right? Let's see which one fell. If you double click on that, this one actually fell right here. Okay, let me just do it again. So this one here, we are supposed to actually create, okay, let's read the test cases together. We should really read all these three together. Okay. Let me document the starter test a little bit here. So here we're saying that manager number one, and if you want to get their name, so this one here should not really give you any null pointer exception, right? You should not. So that means that manager number one should not be null. And also manager number two also should not be null. Manager one should not be null. And also manager 2 should not be null. But at this point, when we're getting two manager objects, we want to make sure their name could be null because we're going to set them to be later, to be Jackie, for example. That's for later. But for now, we want to make sure assert the same should really pass. What's assert same from our JUnit lecture? What does it compare? addresses, right? Okay, so that means we are expecting two things. I'm going to write it down over here as a part of the starter test. Two things should be satisfied by the get instance. Number one, each call to get instance should return a non-null objects. Otherwise, manager1.getName should really give you null pointer exception. Or manager2.getName will also give you null pointer exception. That's number one. Number two over here, we want this to pass. That means every call to the same method get instance should give you just the same objects. All right? Because it's single manager in our project. We want to make sure there's always a single manager. You don't create more than one manager. So number two over here. So you want to say each call to get instance returns the same address. We want to satisfy both of these. All right. So you will definitely see the solution, exactly how to do this. I'll just develop from scratch. Not many lines of code you should really develop. I'll just give you some description as well, so that'll help. I'll go to the store manager over here, and let's see exactly how this can be done. Okay. The way this can be done will be, number one, we want to declare some attributes in this class. Private, static, store manager. We want to maintain a global unique store manager objects over here. So that's why it's static. Okay, let's put it here first. Manager will be null in the beginning. However, this global manager to be returned. And then we have to make sure the constructor of this store manager here is going to create it, right? Let's put the constructor first. So we can say public store manager over here. This name, in the beginning we can just make it null. That's okay, because we can expect some later call set name is going to set the name to be non-null. Okay, just for this particular implementation. And then for this store manager over here, every time you want to return, I cannot just return manager directly. I cannot, because if I do that, the very first time I call this store manager over here, the first time I call this get instance method here, I'm going to return null, which is not the way to go. All right. So what I will do here is to say if the current value for manager is actually null, which it is initially. Okay. I would say if the manager equals null, then I should really change its value to be something not null. Would be new store manager. Otherwise, if manager not equal to null, in that case, I can always return just this global variable, always. So let me just make sure. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, actually, I don't even need it. Okay, let me move some comment here. Then, don't change the reference of manager. Okay, so this will be only 3 lines of implementation. You can see this one and also this one here. Let me explain again. Okay, imagine that you're going to call this get instance method many times. For the very first time you call that, you're going to see that the global variable here, manager, is going to be null. In which case, it's going to hit this branch, and we're going to initialize the manager for just one time, set it to be not null. For all the subsequent call to get instance, when you call get instance for the second time, third time, fourth time, as you will see in the test case, it's going to fail this particular if branch because manager is not null anymore at the moment. And then you're just going to return the same reference. Okay? So one exercise for you, you should really go over that particular test case to see if you are trying to call the get instance twice, how exactly is it going to work? So for the very first time you call the get instance, you're going to set the manager to be something that's not null. And for the second time, third time onwards, you're not going to touch this manager instance anymore. All right? That's a very important insight. So that's why I want to go over with you. All right? And if you do that, and let's see if we got any luck. All right? So that's one pass. All right? So test cases 14 and 15 are to do with this particular get manager, get instance method. And then the last one there, I want to point to you very quickly, right? The very last one there is about how you can find the products in other stores. So this is actually a method that's going to involve like a loop and also go over all the different orders in the retail store. For that one there, you can refer to your practice test 1. I think we did something very similar. Okay, that one just like another practice for the similar method. Right? For that one there, you can definitely refer to what you did in practice test 1. Okay, that one I'll leave to you. Okay, guys, any questions? I think we finished basically almost all the test cases except for 2. Right? But if you continue, and then you should be able to finish all of them. I'll also release a solution. Question?
Can you please about the difference between add order and submit order?
Add order and submit order. Okay, sure, no problem. Very quickly, right? So if you go to customer profile, so you can think about the add order here. Think about the add order is just for individual customer. It's more about their purchase history, right? So if I want to purchase a series of orders, I just want to keep a history. And you can think about submit order is more about updating the stock or maybe the warehouse about the retail store. So that's the difference. They're somehow related, but not exactly the same. Okay? Guys, question? All right, if no, that's good. Thank you for coming. And then I will release the recording and also the solution. Okay? And I'll see you in class tomorrow.